Hello, my friends, and I hope you are having a fantastic day. I finally got to do a little bit of gaming, so I'm doing really well. Kinitsugami is actually very fun, and I'm looking forward to stealing a little bit of time that I can to play through missions on it. That's all about that, though. On to the more serious matters. As usual, Twitter, me, scrolling, found something interesting. Here is Sid Alpha, and he reposted this tweet. He says, a lot of people arguing against mischief for all the wrong reasons here, and they are incorrect. This is not about terms and conditions, at least not all by themselves. This also involves copyright. Valve are maintaining the right to first publication, and by the message used, they are blanket denying any sort of implied license. As the game could still be considered to be unpublished, fair use would be much, much, much more difficult to achieve. Now, you might wonder, well, what in the world are you talking about? A fellow named Tom Warren, who is a senior editor at The Verge, was invited, I guess, to play Valve's new shooter, Deadlock. Now, after doing this, he went ahead and wrote an article. And you might, think, well, no big deal. So he's a games journalist. That's what they do. They play games, they write articles. Yes, they do. However, as you see here, the literal first thing that pops up when you sign into Deadlock is early development build. Deadlock is still early in development with a lot of temporary art and experimental gameplay. Do not share anything about the game with anyone. Says, okay, don't show this again. Now, when Tom saw this, instead of clicking OK or anything like that, he hit escape and the box went away. Now, he is claiming that this then is him not agreeing to the terms and conditions that you might say are laid out here. Thus, he is not bound by them. Unfortunately, there are other schools of thought which we're not going to go into that. As I am not a lawyer, I can't provide any good legal opinion, but I can provide moral opinions. If you are going into something and they give you this kind of warning and you choose to ignore it and you then choose to publish it, you are in the wrong. There's not really any legal issue, or there could be a legal issue. I'm unsure of that. However, legality and morality are not always the same thing and often are on opposite ends of the scale. What he did may in fact be legal. Again, not a lawyer, don't know. But it is immoral. They offered him the game to play as early development, said, hey, don't share this with anybody yet because we're not done. Things change. More importantly, they very likely don't want other people to steal their ideas. And he chose to blatantly ignore that. Now, I really don't want to go through sharing the article that he wrote because I don't believe that it is correct for him to do that. It's one of these reasons that I actually have an issue with data scrapers and scalpers. People like this, people who do this, make it harder for developers to do things like provide early access, to do things like provide demos. Now, in order to create a demo for a video game, they almost literally have to create its own standalone demo so that people don't go through and scrape out things that they don't want people to know about yet. That takes time, that takes money, it takes away from the development of the actual game. And while I understand being excited and wanting more information, there are far too many people who are dishonest and use that information wrongly. Is that to say that people should never leak anything or should never give out information that is negative about a game coming out? No, they absolutely should, depending on a number of factors. But it is not a black and white issue. There's a lot of nuance. However, in his article, he states, I am not under an NDA. I have signed no contract and made no verbal agreements. And he didn't even click through an end user's licensing agreement. He just hit escape and got around something that was giving him a message. And honestly, in my non-legal opinion, continuing to play the game is a form of implied consent. Because if you are not going to comply with the instructions given, then you shouldn't play the game. It's really not that difficult. Granted, I have a very simplistic view of the world. I believe in right and wrong. And obviously, this fellow believes in basically just doing whatever you want if you can come up with a good excuse to get away with it. But he's gone through and he's screenshotted and posted gameplay. And, your opinion may vary on this, and we will cover that opposite opinion in a minute. Here you see him talking out about how Valve opened up Deadlock so that people playtesting it could invite friends earlier this month, and invites have spread far, with Deadlock moving from a peak of about 2,500 players to about 18,000 yesterday. Lots of footage of the unannounced game have been posted to YouTube in recent days. I'm sure he's probably trying to use that as a justification. Unfortunately, they are just as much in the wrong as he is. This is the Mischief referenced in the first post. This is at Mischief's YouTube. You see he's hiding the negative comments about after locking them to followers only and still getting community noted. I did go through the community notes. The original note that had been showing up earlier is that the game is still in early development and everything is a work in progress. There's nothing confirmed about the game. The author blatantly ignored an informal NDA asking them not to share any information about the game, and thus was justly banned from the playtest, which you actually find out later in his own article, where he says they were apparently not okay with him sharing the game with friends in the way he's chosen to, and have in fact banned him. And you may be asking, so what is the difference here between someone leaking something that has been given to them but from someone else and someone doing this? Well, in most cases, honestly, there's not a lot. There really isn't. There's room for nuance, obviously, but in terms of when you should leak information and when you shouldn't, it has a lot to do with the actual information being leaked. If you are leaking information about bad business practices, about manipulative business practices, whistleblowing, that kind of thing, obviously you should be doing that because those are important things for consumers to know. If you are leaking a game that is not yet ready to be published after being asked not to, you're kind of a dick. I mean, that's just my opinion. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who are just fine with it. They don't see a big deal. For one, Valve is a large multi-million-dollar corporation that really isn't going to suffer from this and honestly may see a large boost from this. Because from what I can tell, people are saying positive things about the game. But at the same time, that doesn't mean they were ready. So my issue immediately with this is, as I said earlier, destroying the trust between yourself and a developer. As someone says, there is an excellent chance that he is going to keep the Verge from getting any further information on games going further, at least from Valve at the very least, because they realize, hey, we can't trust these people to do as we ask. And while access media is a thing and normally viewed negatively, there are points at which there are positives to access media. A developer knowing that they can trust you to not share something too early is a portion of access media, and that's actually totally normal and good. Now, doing things like you can't speak poorly about our products or we won't let you continue to look at it, that's bad. But in everything, there are negatives and positives. However, of course, there is a secondary thought process. You see here Valve's baffling deadlock decision don't need defending. This is on Aftermath, and the article is by Riley McLeod. Says Valve has a new game in the works, Deadlock, even though it also doesn't have a new game in the works at all, which we know that there's been a game in the works over there for a little while. They hadn't named it. It's still unannounced. It's not public, which is another issue here, is that this was in no way ready to be public. I don't know that they and all anticipated this. Deadlock is an unannounced hero shooter that tens of thousands of people were playing over the weekend, including streamers and journalists who have been just asked to please not talk about it. Oh my God. God forbid you ask someone to just not talk about something and expect them to kind of, not talk about it. This is obviously their fault for thinking that they could at all trust other people. Wow. How could they do such a terrible, terrible thing? Yesterday, The Verge wrote up their impressions of Deadlock, which reporter Sean Hollister received a no-strings-attached invite. According to Hollister, the game features a pop-up reminding players that it's still in development and saying do not share anything about the game with anyone. Hollister wrote that this message popped up on lunch, but he didn't click OK. Instead, I hit the escape key and watched it disappear, and then thought that, oh, this means I totally don't have to follow what in the world that said because I didn't hit OK. Well, I also didn't agree to government tyranny, yet here I am. I'm not under NDA, and I have signed no contracts and made no verbal agreements, Hollister wrote. I haven't even clicked through a EULA. As I've written before, companies will often attach caveats to game access they provide journalists, which can be an embargo, agreeing not to publish something until a certain time, or a non-disclosure agreement, a legally binding contract about what a journalist can or cannot say. A dismissible pop-up is neither of these things. Hollister didn't agree to any special rules in exchange for deadlock access or break any agreements by writing it up, and he apparently wasn't even required to agree to Valve's ask, although this seems to me like a technical oversight rather than an intended option. Yet realistically, Valve needs to go back in and make it so that if you don't click OK, you can't play the game. This hasn't stopped people from being very mad at The Verge, with Verge commenters calling Hollister a bad journalist and saying it's a scummy thing to blog about, and that the post kind of goes against the spirit of gaming industry ethics. Comments under Verge staffers' tweets are equally outraged, citing unprofessionalism and calling it karma that Hollister was banned from multiplayer, even though he wrote that the current build lets anyone with a copy invite as many Steam friends as they'd like to give a try to. So, was The Verge publishing this story a nice thing to do? Not really. Valve asked people with deadlock access not to share about it. And it's not very nice to ignore requests someone makes of you. But while no good journalist sets out to intentionally harm someone, the professional requires honesty and fairness over niceness. Okay, but who are we being honest and fair to? This can be complicated, and all journalists struggle with it. Well, yeah, we've noticed that. That's part of why gaming journalism is failing, because they're only honest and fair when it benefits them. And honestly, he's not being honest or fair in this way, in this situation at all. He knew when he clicked escape and got past that with nothing, that what he was doing was wrong. And he continues to know that. He just doesn't care. The news value of The Verge's story is clear. Valve has been bizarrely secretive about Deadlock, a game thousands of people are currently playing. Readers are right to want to know more about it and what it's like to play, and Hollister can tell them while still adhering to journalistic ethics, except he didn't. He didn't get access illicitly or misrepresent himself or break any agreements. No, he just ignored that they asked him not to talk about it. This isn't a life or death situation. This is gaming. You can't apply the same type of rules that you would in a serious news forum. This is not him getting top secret information from some government leaker about some nefarious plan to blow up the Capitol or something. This isn't. This is video gaming. This is something that he absolutely did not have to tell everybody immediately, except for the fact he wanted to because he knew it was a scoop and it would probably make him money. That's not ethical. I don't care how many thousands of people are being allowed to play it. They're all being asked not to talk about it. The funny thing is so many of them chose not to. This isn't even a situation specific to journalism. Hollister was not granted special access to the game because of his profession, and there's nothing to stop any player from doing what he did, except for morality and, it's still being wrong. The same thing that should have stopped him should have stopped them. In fact, plenty of other people have. I can find YouTube videos and Twitch streams of the game easily. And that doesn't make it right. Valve could crack down on these, I imagine, by removing these people's access to Deadlock or potentially taking other actions if they clicked the OK button Hollister was able to ignore. They can actually do it even if they didn't click the OK button. They don't have to click the OK button for them to be able to revoke access. The Verge could face bigger consequences. Valve could blacklist the outlet, and while I would consider that petty, especially since the company's tech permitted Hollister to dismiss the agreement, Valve is under no obligation to give The Verge access to its games or reply to the outlet's questions, the same way The Verge is under no obligation to do what Valve wants regarding its game if there wasn't a formal agreement. I hate this kind of moral equivocating, because here's the issue. You don't have to have a formal agreement to not do these things. He was asked whether he clicked OK or not. He was asked. The clicking OK is a secondary thing. And because he chose to ignore it at that point, they're fully in their right to blacklist The Verge. And it's not petty for them not to. If you know that somebody is going to ignore your boundaries, there is nothing petty about not letting them past your boundaries anymore. At this point, this is gaslighting, and it's bullshit. And it's what games journalists have been doing for ages. There are broader questions here about the relationship between game companies and journalists, something that's become more and more of a topic of conversation since December's Insomniac hack. Impressions from a news outlet, especially one with the reputation of The Verge, have the power to shape public perception of deadlock. Unfortunately, this is going to shape the public perception of The Verge more than it's going to shape the public perception of deadlock, because this was not acquired in an honest method, and most people don't like that. The Verge's article surely goes against whatever Valve's completely baffling marketing plan for deadlock is, but again, over 16,000 people are playing this game right now and forming opinions on it. So, I don't care if 100,000 people are playing it. That doesn't make it right. Just because a large amount of people are doing a thing doesn't mean that what you do is okay. I don't care if every other person is streaming it, they're still in the wrong. Just because a majority of people or a large number of people are doing a thing does not make it okay. His responsibility to inform... No, his responsibility was to play the game and keep it in the back burner so that he could see how it developed, and then, when it was allowed, report on the game. Not before. There is nothing that... This is not a life or death situation. This is not something that people need to know right now. It's gaming. And I've said it before, as much as I love gaming, it is not necessary to life. There is no amount of excuse that you can give that would make this okay. While I wouldn't fault anyone at Valve for being pissed at the situation, I'd call this journalism functioning as intended, really. So journalism is supposed to leave the people you're reporting on who aren't doing anything wrong. Let's be clear about this. Valve isn't doing anything wrong. They're not creating a storyline people aren't interested in. They're not doing anything that would cause tension in terms of culture. They're not doing anything but developing a game. And you're going to try to say that this is journalism functioning as intended. Journalism functioning as intended does not mean that the person who gave you something in good faith now does not trust you. Because what you did not have to be done. There was no moral imperative at that moment to break that trust. No one was being hurt. No one was in any way in absolute dire need of that information. Just because the information exists does not mean people need to have it at this moment. Fear of missing out is such a serious issue in the world that it is actually literally clouding people's judgment. There is no reason people couldn't have waited for this information. Yeah, is it exciting maybe? I don't know. I don't play those types of games, so I really don't give a fuck. If it's a fun game, people might be very excited for it. But that doesn't mean that they needed the information now, especially since the information, in all likelihood, could be outdated as they update the game. Because of this kind of stuff, you don't have the ability for play tests anymore. You're going to not... That's the problem. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm really angry. This is why I have a problem with these kinds of people. Because of this kind of stuff, you don't get play tests the same way you used to be. They can't be as in-depth and valuable as they used to be because they can't take the risk that people are going to take the information and run with it before they're ready to deal with the information. They can't take the risks that they used to be able to. They have, like I said earlier, they have to build demos almost entirely separately from the game to protect valuable information so that they have any chance of doing anything the way they plan to with their property. It's frustrating and it makes things harder. It makes it more difficult for them to do things like Q&A. Especially in PC gaming, when you look at the number of configurations between hardware, software, and firmware that can be out there, the fact that they can't test for every situation and now they can't even trust other players or anybody really to just help them out a little without having to spread it everywhere like some kind of venereal disease. It doesn't help gamers. It doesn't help anybody. I don't understand why people feel that it is so important to push this information out when it's not helping. Yeah, just because you have the information doesn't mean it's going to help you. People think they deserve more. You give them an inch, they take a mile. And yes, gamers do deserve to have information. Developers also should be completely allowed and deserve to have their privacy until they are able to present more information on it in a way that they want to. These are two things that coexist quite handily. Having more information before someone is ready to talk about it often leads to misunderstandings and issues. It's funny because the one thing I think about the entire time being angry about this is The Last of Us 2 leaks and how they came out. And again, while I can say that what the person who leaked that stuff did was immoral, the reaction of Naughty Dog to it was far worse. It is, again, gaming, so people didn't need to have that information ahead of time. They just didn't. It's great in many ways that they did because people were able to ignore it sooner, but in the end, I kind of feel that things would have ended up the way they did anyway, because people would have played through that first half up to Joel, and a lot of people would have wanted a refund. You'd have had basically a Cyberpunk 2077 situation all over again, except not this time, not over technical issues. The absolute attempt to justify this behavior is mind-boggling to me. I get it. You like your job. You want to tell people about things. But being dishonest about it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you, it doesn't help the company you help for, and it doesn't help the company that you're doing it to. And realistically, in this situation, it may not even help the players because of the things that can change between now and then. Just because 16,000 people are playing a version of a game now doesn't mean that that's going to be the final version. They could decide to change everything. Who knows? They could decide to scrap it utterly just because of this. I doubt it. They likely have way too much money in it for them to feel that that's an option. But the entitlement, and I think that's the part that makes me the angriest, is the entitlement of this situation. The fact that these people feel that they are entitled to share this information because they didn't click OK. Because, I didn't actually agree to it. It is manipulative and it is bullshit. I do not understand how you can be okay with damaging trust on this level. It makes no sense to me. And it makes me angry in terms of businesses I am willing to associate with. It makes me view The Verge in a very negative light, and I will probably avoid their articles in the future, as well as anything else regarding them in an effort to make sure that I in no way contribute to them making money. Because there are a few lines that I really do get absolutely enraged about. But this kind of dishonesty and this level of manipulation hits that spot for me. And yeah, who knows? It could just because I'm the person I am. I'm sure plenty of other people will be just fine with it, but that's their decision to make. All that said, what do you think? Do you think he was only doing what was right? Do you think what he did was wrong? Do you disagree with me? I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. If you really liked it, you can feel free to share it around, and I will catch you later.